It started with the sound of a squeaky wheel. One of the front casters on the wheelchair dragged slightly to the left, making a soft whine every time it rolled over the tile near the glass entrance. He was waiting for someone to open the door. Not begging, not complaining, just sitting there, angled toward the exit, both hands resting quietly on his lap. One glove missing, fingers stiff with age and weather. Inside, the lobby buzzed. Security guards near the checkpoint laughed loud. One leaned back in his chair and pointed. "Look at that guy. Been sitting there 10 minutes. What's he waiting for, clearance?" Another joined in. Should have brought a leash and someone to drag him. They all laughed. Big laughs. Unchecked. The man on the chair didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't ask for help. Just stared straight ahead. But a few feet behind him, standing near the soda machine, a younger man in a baseball cap watched everything. Didn't speak. Didn't step forward. Didn't introduce himself. He just watched. That was his father. The guards didn't know that. They also didn't know the man with the cap was the commanding general of United States Army operations. He didn't raise his voice that day. He didn't need to. Where are you watching from? What's one thing you've seen that made you want to speak, but didn't? Drop a comment. Some people don't defend themselves, but the world doesn't always let that go. Every morning, before the sky turned gold, he rolled out to the sidewalk, literally rolled, with a soft push of his hands against worn wheels, his right palm still wrapped in athletic tape that had not been replaced in days. The sidewalk cracked near the curb where he lived. He knew the cracks by feel, knew which ones tilted too hard, which ones could tip him if he wasn't careful. He had never fallen, not once, not in the 10 years since he started taking this same route. The same block, same bench near the bus stop, same timing. 20 minutes before the first light rail came through. His name was Ellis. No one used it. Most called him Sir, if they addressed him at all. Some called him Wheelchair Guy. A few called him nothing, just looked away when he rolled past. It didn't bother him. He didn't expect anyone to look. He had already learned the math of being seen and not being seen. He wasn't homeless. People often assumed he was. But he lived in a small apartment above a dry cleaner. The building didn't have an elevator, but the woman downstairs let him use the rear entrance, the one with the ramp, and he paid rent in full, on time, every month. He had a pension. Military. He never talked about it. Never wore a pin. Never asked for a discount. If someone brought it up, he changed the subject. Because the real thing he survived wasn't war. It was what came after. His daily routine had no speeches, no audience, just quiet systems he followed to stay steady. A cup of black coffee, no sugar, no cream, a check of the weather on the tiny flip phone he still used, a stretch of his left shoulder, the one that always ached after sleep. Then the wheels. He checked them every day, even when he wasn't going far. Tires full, brakes tight, casters aligned. He never trusted systems that moved without his control. That was something he'd earned the hard way. He never asked for help, not because he was proud, because help often came with assumptions. People talked louder, used simpler words, touched the handles of his chair without asking. Worse than any insult was the hand that reached out uninvited, like his body wasn't his. So he chose stillness instead. Let people move around him. Let the world speed past. Let himself become background. Most days, he didn't mind. He ate lunch at the same park 3 blocks down. Same bench, back facing the playground. He liked the sound of kids, not because he had many in his life, only one, and he rarely visited, but because kids didn't calculate presence. They ran past him without hesitation, without pity. Sometimes they even asked questions. How fast can that go? Can I ride it? Do you sleep in it? He liked that. It was honest. It didn't wrap him in softness or shame. It just met him where he sat. He had a son. Tall, quiet, sharp. Used to call every Sunday. Now it was every 3rd Sunday. That was fine. Ellis never needed noise to feel connected. Sometimes the sun came by. Never in uniform. Always plain clothes. Jeans, sneakers, ball cap pulled low. They didn't talk about work. Not because it was secret. Because the son had learned from Ellis to keep power out of conversation. One time, Ellis asked how things were going. The son said, "Moving fast." Ellis nodded. That was enough. They didn't need details. The silence between them was full of understanding, not distance. The building staff respected Ellis. The mailman always placed his envelope at the lowest row of boxes. The woman who ran the dry cleaner never charged him for steamed shirts, even when he insisted. He never demanded this kindness, just received it with a nod. Sometimes kindness was best left unspoken. When it came with no receipt, it lasted longer. One guard at the train station held the door for him every week. Young kid, never said much, but always waited when Ellis approached, until he didn't. One week, the kid was gone, replaced by someone older, louder. This new guard never held the door, never looked at him. Once said, "Not my job to be a doorman." Ellis didn't react, just waited for someone else to pass through and catch the door in motion. It always worked. Eventually, you learn to build patience when the world stops opening for you. Some people asked if he had family. He said no, not because it was true, because it made things simpler. If they knew who his son was, they would act different. He didn't want that. He didn't need pity replaced with performance. So he stayed invisible, deliberately. It made the moments of real respect easier to see. The chair he used wasn't standard, modified, not with tech, with care. The seat had a layer of memory foam, wrapped in fabric stitched by hand. The frame was light, custom wheels, low to the ground, designed for efficiency, not speed. He'd made most of the adjustments himself, not because he didn't trust others, because he liked knowing the limits of what held him up. That's what he'd always done, from his first assignment until now. He didn't carry a weapon, didn't carry a grudge, just keys. 2 of them, one for the door, one for the drawer and the small wooden desk in his apartment. Inside that drawer, a medal, folded in the citation paper, never displayed, and a photo, taken 27 years ago. A younger Ellis, standing beside a boy who barely reached his waist. Both of them looking straight ahead, not smiling, just present. Still, most days, Ellis went to the mall not to shop, but to move. The floor was smooth, the lighting even. He made 2 loops, sometimes 3. Stopped at the bookstore, read the same paragraph from the same history shelf, then left. That day, the one that changed everything, started the same way. Loop 1, loop 2, bathroom stop, lap 3, then the door. He waited, hands folded, did not ask, did not speak. And behind him, someone watched. Not a stranger, not a passerby. His son, there by coincidence, or maybe not. And when the laughter started, the son did not intervene. He just stood, recorded it in silence, not with a phone, with memory, because power doesn't always speak in the moment. Sometimes it waits, and when it moves, no one sees it coming. It was the 3rd lap. Ellis had already passed the magazine rack, nodded at the shoe cleaner near the east entrance, and made his way toward the sliding doors that led out to the parking lot. That was usually where he waited a few minutes before heading home. The door didn't open this time. Sensor probably misaligned, he thought, or maybe the motion was too subtle. He sat there, waited, hands folded. It didn't bother him. He had time. Inside the building, 3 uniformed security guards stood behind the front desk. Not police, not military, just hired presence. They were bored. The shift was slow. Nothing to chase, nothing to write up, just hours. And when boredom meets power, even shallow power, people reach for entertainment. One of them saw Ellis through the glass, pointed, said, "You think he's stuck, or staging a protest?" The second one laughed. "Nah, that's wheels. He does laps here like it's cardio." Third one snorted. "He even pay rent to roll through." They all laughed. Not loud enough to draw attention, but loud enough to enjoy themselves. Ellis heard it, didn't turn. He had heard that kind of laugh before. In hospitals, in waiting rooms, at intersections. He knew the rhythm of it, the kind that wasn't meant for you, but aimed close enough to pierce. He didn't respond. Not because he didn't care, because he had learned long ago that responding only makes them louder. The door still hadn't opened. One of the guards stepped forward, pressed the handicap button from the inside, hard. The door jerked, opened halfway, then paused. The guard held it for a second, then released it just as Ellis reached the threshold. The door closed too soon. Not a slam, but close, enough to force Ellis to stop short. The caster hit the edge of the rubber lining, made a dull knock. The guards laughed again. Ellis didn't look up, didn't speak, just reversed, waited. The next person to walk through, a woman pushing a stroller, caught the door open with her foot and smiled gently. He nodded, rolled out, didn't look back. His son saw the whole thing. He had arrived early, was supposed to meet Ellis outside and walk back to the apartment with him. But when he saw the guards and the laugh and the door, he stopped walking, didn't intervene, didn't raise his voice, just watched, not with helplessness, with record, because the worst disrespect is not what people say to your face. It's what they say when they think no one in the room matters enough to listen. The guards didn't see him, just another civilian in a cap and jacket. He waited until Ellis rolled ahead, turned the corner, and left view. Then he took 2 steps forward, paused by the vending machine, turned, and met eyes with the guard who had held the door. The guard looked at him, then looked away, didn't recognize the face, didn't recognize the authority behind it, didn't know what it meant when the younger man held that look 3 seconds longer than natural, and didn't blink. That night, the guards joked about it again. One of them had caught the door closing on their phone, posted it to a private group, captioned, "When you're too slow for the auto door and too proud to ask for help." 5 likes, 2 comments, 1 laugh emoji, then nothing. No shares, no viral moment. The post disappeared within the hour. Deleted? Maybe. Or maybe removed by something that moved faster than them. The next morning, their supervisor called them in, asked about a report filed against their behavior. They denied everything, said there was no confrontation, said they had never touched the man, which was true. They hadn't touched him. They had only let the world touch him in their place. That kind of damage doesn't bruise. It doesn't show up on security footage, only in memory. The supervisor nodded, said the complaint had no attached name, just an email, no signature, but the message had been flagged high priority, above his clearance. The supervisor said, whatever it was, it came from outside, way outside. He told them to be careful, to watch their language, to stay off phones during shifts. They laughed when they left the office, said it was probably some busybody, said no one cared what they did. They were wrong. That evening, Ellis sat in his kitchen. His son brewed tea. Neither spoke for a while. Then the son asked, "You good?" Ellis nodded, then said, "I'm used to it." The son didn't answer right away, then said, "That's the problem." He didn't explain further. Didn't need to. Ellis understood. His son had learned to lead thousands of soldiers, but in that moment, all the medals, all the ranks, all the training, had no words strong enough to undo what 3 rent-a-guards had taken away with a laugh and a door. But power, real power, doesn't always speak in the moment. Sometimes it waits until the ones who laughed stop looking over their shoulders, until they start to believe nothing's coming, that it moves, without name, without warning, without a file. One of the guards went home that week to find a letter from the security contractor. Effective next month, your post will be reassigned. No reason given. Another applied for a role at a different mall. The interview was canceled. No explanation. The last tried to file a grievance, citing harassment. The form returned with an error. His access card deactivated a week later. Not fired, just left out. Not expelled, just not invited back. None of them were confronted. No one screamed. No protest. Just stillness. And the stillness kept growing. Ellis never mentioned it again. Never asked what happened. Never needed to. Because the next time he rolled toward that door, it opened before he arrived. No button pressed. No delay. No voice behind it. Just an opening. Soft. Automatic. Uninterrupted. And on the inside, a new face at the desk. Not smiling, not overly helpful, just attentive, present, there. His son wasn't with him that time. Didn't need to be, because the room already remembered. And from then on, it never forgot. Her screen blinked once, then again. Angela was a junior contractor for a third-party clearance verification unit. Her job wasn't flashy. She didn't make decisions. She didn't get briefed. She didn't even know the full name of the building she worked inside. The ID badge just had a logo and the name of a staffing firm that changed every 2 years. She verified access. That was it. People applied for clearance. Contractors, staff, even temp guards in government buildings. Angela's job was to run their names through the back end, flag anything odd, check the codes, mark them either proceed, escalate, or close. It was always mechanical, until the names started coming back blank. The first was Harrison, one of the guards from the lobby. Angela saw his file. Basic clearance, request for a transfer to another building. She ran his ID through the system. It froze, then loaded a white screen. Not denied, not escalated. Just white. Then a message. This file is unavailable for viewing under your current level. She checked her level. Tier 3. Enough to read financials. Enough to override minor alerts. This should not have blocked her. She tried again. Same result. So she sent a ping. Just a system-level question. No names. No context. Just the code she'd received. The response came from someone she didn't know. No signature. Just one sentence. Do not pursue this file. She closed the window. Did not ask again. The next name came 2 days later. Another guard, Tate. Similar file. Transfer request. Pending clearance. This time, before she even entered the system, a message preloaded. This applicant's status has been sealed under directive discretion. Do not forward. Do not log. She had never seen that language before. It wasn't classified. It wasn't marked sensitive. It just told her to stop. Angela leaned back in her chair. Something was wrong. These weren't high-level people. Not agents. Not officials. Just low-rung security guards. Why were their names hitting blocks she'd only seen used for undercover identity seals and burn-list contractors? She turned to her colleague, asked if he'd ever seen that directive code before. He looked. His face shifted. Said, "Don't flag it. Don't ask about it. Just close it." Angela asked, "You know what this is?" He didn't answer. Just turned back to his screen. Later that night, she searched the directive on her home computer. Found nothing. Not even rumors. She asked in a quiet Discord where other clearance contractors gathered. One person replied in a private message. "It's a W directive." Angela typed back, "What's W?" The reply came slowly. Not as. Was a sign-off marker used by someone who no longer has to sign off. She asked, "You mean they're retired?" The reply, "No, I mean their approval is embedded. Legacy authority." Angela stared at the screen, then typed, "So these names, they're being flagged by someone who isn't even in the room anymore?" The reply, "No, they're being removed by someone who doesn't need the room." After that, the user logged off. In another department, a data analyst ran a batch audit on inactive profiles. The system flagged 3 anomalies. Inactive, yet also marked non-removable. That didn't make sense. He tried to delete one to test the code. The request failed. A warning appeared. This name is currently locked by W-channel encryption. Do not attempt override. The analyst flagged it to his manager. The manager came over, saw the screen, and said, "Close it. Forget it. You don't want to know whose shadow that is." The analyst asked, "Who is W?" The manager replied, "The person who doesn't write warnings. Only conclusions." Back in the building where Ellis had once waited by the door, a new supervisor reviewed the files of the outgoing security staff. The termination notices were blank. No notes, no incidents, no HR documentation, just a checkbox. Access suspended, no re-entry. The supervisor asked the vendor contact if this was standard. The vendor said, "Those names are cold. That's all you need to know." The supervisor pushed. "Cold. The vendor replied, "Marked, not blacklisted, just closed out." The supervisor asked, "Why?" The vendor didn't answer, because even asking had weight. One of the guards, the one who had pressed the handicap button early, tried applying at a different firm. He never heard back. When he called, the number disconnected. When he emailed, it bounced. When he showed up in person, no one would see him. Later, he got a letter. Not on official paper, just a printout. For words, "You've already been seen." He didn't know what it meant, but he stopped applying after that. Angela tried once more, out of curiosity. Just typed the first 4 letters of Harrison's last name into a private index. A name popped up beside it. Not his, not Tate's, just a code name. W. She hovered over it. No file, no photo, just a single note. This designation has permanent system weight. Manual override not available. She shut her computer, logged off early, walked home in silence, and for the first time in her career, she felt watched, not by cameras, but by memory. Ellis didn't know any of this. He drank his tea the same way, rolled the same route. He never asked what happened, never needed to, because some men don't pull strings. They cut them loose and let the system feel the absence. His son, still serving, never brought it up. He never called a contact, never sent message, because he didn't need to. When power runs deep enough, it doesn't push. It waits, and when it waits long enough, the world moves without instruction. All it takes is for the right person to stop holding it in place. Her name was Latasha. She had worked in facilities, scheduling for 7 years. No big office, no title on the door, just a desk between the elevator and the water cooler. People passed her every day without noticing, but she noticed everything. Who showed up early, who left without logging time, who spoke kindly when no one was watching, and who didn't. One morning, she received a scheduling change request. 3 temporary security posts were being cleared from the rotation. Names: Harrison, Tate, Mendoza. She recognized 2 of the names, not because they were kind, because they were loud, always joking too hard, always laughing when no one else was. She remembered Harrison calling an older man door decor. She remembered Mendoza pretending not to see a wheelchair user trying to leave the lobby. She remembered not saying anything. That memory still sat in her stomach like something unchewed. She opened the request. Standard template, marked clear for reassignment. But the reassignment list was empty. There was no next post, no next shift, just deletion. Not fired, not exited, just erased from the rotation cycle. It was her job to route them to the next open assignment. She didn't. At first, she told herself it was an oversight. She left the fields blank, saved the form, moved on. But later, she came back, stared at it. Not because she didn't know what to do, because she finally admitted to herself she didn't know what to do. She opened a notes section on the file, typed nothing, just hit reviewed, then closed it. Later that week, the supervisor asked if those positions had been reassigned. She said they were cleared. Supervisor asked, "Replacements?" She shrugged, said, "Pending." They didn't push, because people only push when something seems worth saving. And by now, no one was rushing to hold onto those names. She began noticing a pattern. Emails involving those 3 stopped getting responses, even internally. One tried to appeal for reinstatement. The email never made it to HR, because the system blocked it as unauthorized sender. Latasha saw the bounce back, could have forwarded it manually. She didn't. Not from spite, from clarity. She had watched too many people laugh at those who couldn't stand. She had heard too many jokes about the slow, the small, the silent. But she had never seen what happened after someone important saw it too. And now she had. In the lunchroom, someone brought up Mendoza, said he was looking for work, said he was complaining online that the system was rigged against him. Latasha didn't comment, but inside she thought, no, the system just finally stopped protecting you. One of the custodians, a quiet man named David, had once been the target of Tate's sarcasm. Tate used to snap his fingers and say, Floor needs love, man. Get on it. David had never replied. Never changed expression. Just kept working. Now Tate was gone, and David walked past the lobby with a different posture. Not louder, just uninterrupted. Latasha started noticing who people made room for, who they didn't. There was a man who came every Thursday in a wheelchair. Didn't speak much. Didn't ask for help. She began holding the elevator when she saw him approach. Didn't say anything. Just made space. He nodded once. That was enough. She didn't tell anyone what she had done. Didn't consider it whistleblowing. Didn't consider it retaliation. She just stopped participating. Stopped forwarding the names of men who made the world smaller for others. Stopped helping the wrong people stay in the room. One afternoon, she got a call from someone higher up. Asked her to confirm that Harrison had been cleared from the schedule. She said, yes. They asked, any notes? She paused, then said, just marked as cleared. No follow-up requested. The caller was silent for a beat, then said, copy. Thank you. That was it. She knew that tone. It meant we know. And we're not going to say it out loud. She printed the weekly schedule like always. Posted it by the staff entrance. Someone came by later and noticed the names missing. Asked, hey, what happened to the loud guys? Latasha shrugged. Guess they moved on. The person nodded, said, good, and walked away. No more questions. Ellis passed her once in the hallway. Not close, not direct, but enough for her to recognize him. She didn't say anything. He didn't notice her, but she still whispered, just under her breath, I saw it, and I didn't help then. But I won't help them now either. It wasn't justice. It wasn't revenge. It was a decision, a small one, but it echoed. Because when people like Latasha, quiet, consistent, stop covering for what's wrong, the wrong loses its footing, and the system learns to lean elsewhere. None of the guards ever knew who blocked them. No rejection letter. No email trail. Just a door that didn't open again. A login that never reactivated. And a hallway that no longer knew their names. Latasha kept showing up. Kept doing her work. But now, she checked the names a little longer. Watched a little closer. And when something felt wrong, she didn't escalate it. She didn't confront it. She just withheld her hand. Let the silence do the rest. Harrison woke up to an inbox that looked exactly like it did yesterday. No responses. No interviews. No follow-ups. He checked the job portal again. Still listed as in review. It had been 12 days. He clicked the refresh button 5 times. Nothing changed. He called the contact number from the listing. It rang twice, then disconnected. He tried again. Same result. He stared at the screen for a while, then got up and poured coffee into the same chipped mug he had used for 6 years. Nothing tasted different, but something was off. Tate had applied for a nighttime security position at a distribution warehouse. No high clearance required. No deep background checks. Just a clean ID and a pulse. He passed the interview. Got the welcome to the team email. He was told to expect a call from onboarding by Friday. Friday came. Then Saturday. Then Monday. Nothing. He called. The number was active, but no one answered. He left a voicemail. Never got a response. The job listing vanished the next week. He tried applying again. The system flagged his email as previously processed. But no application appeared in his portal. He switched emails. Tried again. Same result. Mendoza, after 3 rejections and 2 months of radio silence, stopped sending resumes. He started walking more. Not for health, just to quiet the noise in his head. He passed a storefront one afternoon and saw "Help Wanted" sign in the window. He stepped inside. It was a small security equipment shop. He spoke to the owner, an older woman with kind eyes. She asked where he had worked before. He named the building. She nodded, told him she would call if anything opened up. He knew she would not. There was something in her face. Not judgment, not fear, just a kind of soft recoil. Like she had once touched something hot and now saw the shape of it in him. Harrison's banking app glitched. He tried sending money to pay a utility bill. It failed. He tried again. The error message read, "Transaction not permitted." He called the bank. They told him his account was flagged for review. Not frozen, not closed, just pending a routine audit. He asked how long it would take. They said they did not know. He asked why it had been triggered. They said it was an automated flag. They could not provide further detail. He hung up, stared at the wall, and felt the silence begin to settle in. Tate had tried contacting his old supervisor, not to beg, just to ask, to understand. The message came back undeliverable. He checked again. The email had been deactivated. No forwarding, no signature, just a full stop. He opened the HR portal to download his records. His login was rejected. Access revoked. No instructions. No link to retrieve. Just a wall. Not closed. Not locked. Just gone. Mendoza overheard someone talking about a man in a wheelchair at a food court. They were laughing, telling a story about how someone made fun of him once. He walked over, stood near the edge of the table. The men went quiet. Mendoza asked, "What happened to the guy who made fun of him?" One of them muttered, "He does not work here anymore." Mendoza nodded, walked away, and did not look back. At night, Harrison scrolled forums about blacklisting, soft erasure. He read stories that sounded too familiar, people whose accounts no longer worked, job applications that never reached the final screen, emails that were never returned. He posted a question. Has anyone else experienced disappearing opportunities? No one replied. He posted it again. The thread was removed. No message. Just vanished. Tate stopped going out. He kept curtains drawn. Started missing appointments. Not because he forgot, because something inside him had gone still. It was not fear. It was absence. The kind that lingers when you know your name no longer opens anything. Mendoza tried volunteering. Thought maybe he could start fresh. He filled out a simple form at a local shelter. Got a call 2 days later. A woman's voice. Polite. Professional. She said, "We are not accepting new volunteers at this time." He said, "But I saw your ad posted yesterday." She paused, then said, "I understand, but we have everything we need." He said, "Do you know my name?" She replied, "Yes." That was all. The world did not push them away. It simply stopped acknowledging they were ever part of it. And that was worse than being opposed. Because opposition gives you something to press against. Silence gives you nothing. Ellis kept his routine. Unchanged. He moved with the same pace. Stopped at the same places. Sat on the same bench every Tuesday morning. Sometimes he watched the clouds. Sometimes he read the paper. He never brought up what happened. Never spoke of consequences. Because he understood the difference between revenge and return. This was not punishment. This was a pendulum finally swinging back. And it did not need help. Only space. His son knew. Not the details. But the pattern. He had seen it before. When someone crosses a line they never realized was a boundary until it was already behind them. He did not gloat. Did not interfere. He made no calls. Signed no orders. He simply let the silence hold its shape. And it did. Perfectly. Tate once walked past a recruiter at a job fair. The recruiter looked at his badge, then looked away. No words. No scan. Just a hand that reached for the next person. That was all. Harrison met someone at a local event. They spoke briefly. She smiled. Said she worked in staffing. He asked for a card. She gave it. He emailed that evening. No response. He emailed again. The email bounced. He looked closer at the card. It had no last name. No logo. No number. Just an address that no longer resolved on any map. It felt like a reminder. One last moment of false hope. Just to make sure he remembered what had been taken. Mendoza started writing his name on scraps of paper. Left them places. Tacked them on poles. Inside bathroom stalls. Not messages. Just his name. A silent request for the world to remember it. Most were torn down by morning. He never posted them again. They were not jailed. Not fined. Not exposed. But they were removed. From systems. From routines. From relevance. And what replaced them? Nothing. Just the echo of what used to be. The email came mid-morning. It was polite. Crisp. Non-desperate. Subject line: Community Legacy Initiative. Request for quiet advisory role. Ellis read it once, then read it again. He understood every word, but not the intent. Not at first. It was the kind of message that said a lot by what it avoided. The sender never mentioned his background, never said veteran, never said leadership, never said surveillance. But they knew. They knew enough to find him. And they wanted more than a quote. They wanted his name. The offer was simple. An internal program, federally adjacent, but not fully public. An effort to improve community trust, strengthen intergenerational dialogue, build pathways between experienced leaders and rising outreach models. They wanted to use him as a face, not front-facing, but quietly, as a proof of trust. His name in the footnotes, his signature on the second page of the agreement, his silence in the press kit. That was all. He could stay home. He could say nothing. Just one yes, and they'd take care of the rest. They even said that. We will take care of the rest. Ellis closed the email and left it unanswered. 2 days later, a printed version arrived. No signature, just a seal. A letterhead from an unnamed division. One line stood out. We recognize the value of your steady presence. We seek no public alignment, only a nod. That word stayed with him. A nod, not a demand, not even a favor. Just a quiet affirmation that he approved of what they were doing. He didn't answer, didn't throw it away, just left it on the kitchen counter, next to the folded paper where he tracked his tea schedule, next to the jar of loose tobacco he hadn't touched in months, next to the silence that had built itself a home in his apartment long before the message came. On 5th day, a man appeared in the hallway of Ellis's building. No badge, no briefcase, just a suit that didn't quite match the season. He waited by the mailboxes until Ellis returned from his walk, then stepped forward. Didn't introduce himself, just said, "We received your file. Just wanted to make sure you were clear on the scope." Ellis looked at him. Not cold, not warm, just looked, then said, "I'm clear." The man waited. Ellis did not speak again. The man nodded once, then left. He never received another message. Not directly, but things moved. Far away from him. Quietly, the ripple started. The program that wanted him, the Community Legacy Initiative, had already used his name, not publicly, but in pitch decks, in internal memos, in anticipated support fields. They never asked for permission before writing it, because they never thought he'd say no. They had written his name in pencil, then laminated it. Now they had to erase it and pretend it was never there. That process took longer than expected. The division overseeing the funding flagged the change, asked for clarification. The project lead stalled, said Ellis was still reviewing. That wasn't true. Ellis wasn't reviewing anything. He had already spoken, with absence, with refusal. And refusal, when it comes from someone whose agreement is built into the foundation, doesn't just close a door, it moves the building. Internal confidence dropped. The funders asked for backup endorsements. There were none. No one of equal weight. No one willing to substitute. Because Ellis wasn't just a name. He was a seal. An old one. A seal that had once been stamped on documents not meant to be seen. When that seal disappears, so does the thread holding the papers together. By week 3, the program was paused. Internally. Quietly. No announcement. No cancellation email. Just a shift in tone. People stopped replying to threads. Meetings were rescheduled. Drafts were still under review. And everyone involved started looking sideways, asking softly, "Who gave us the idea to use him?" No one had a clear answer, because no one wanted to take credit for reaching out to someone who now clearly wanted nothing to do with them. One director said, "We assumed he was aligned." Another said, "He's been quiet for years. We thought that meant support." A third said, "Silence doesn't mean permission." That was the last word spoken in that meeting. Ellis went on with his life, walked the same blocks, waved to the same shopkeepers, said no more or less than he had before. But now people noticed him differently, not because he had done something, because someone had tried to use him and failed, and that failure had left a scent. The man in the suit returned once. Didn't come inside. Just stood across the street, looking at the building. Ellis saw him from a window. Did not move. Just drank his tea. And the man eventually turned and walked away. Not rushed, but clearly finished. Elsewhere, someone reviewed the program's archived plans. Noted that every time they had tried to revive it, something had gone wrong. Documents disappeared. Signatures withdrawn. Clearances delayed. A pattern. Someone wrote a note in the margin of the internal memo. 3 words. Too close now. That memo was never uploaded. One young analyst, trying to clean up the back-end data from a failed program, saw the trace of Ellis's name in an early draft. He didn't recognize it at first. Just flagged it as incomplete. Tried to validate. The system rejected the input. Error code W-7. No override permitted. He asked his supervisor. She came over, looked at the screen, then said, "Close it. Right now." He hesitated. She said again, "Close it. Do not mention it again." He clicked out, logged off for the day, and never brought it up. That's how it went. Everywhere. No alarms. No firings. No fallout. Just stillness. The kind that settles when something sacred is misused and then walks away. Ellis never followed up. Never asked who had sent the offer. Never inquired about the ripple. But he felt it. Not in events. In air. The way people paused near him now. The way certain conversations stopped when he entered a room. The way his refusal had filled more space than 1,000 acceptances. One clerk in a licensing office flagged a name during a routine check. The name was one of the old guards. He tried to submit an appeal for reinstatement. The clerk saw a silent note beside the file, marked with an override tag she had never seen before. She asked her supervisor what to do. The supervisor said, "Do nothing." The clerk asked, "What if he calls?" The supervisor said, "He won't." And he didn't. Ellis passed a young man one day on the sidewalk. The man stepped aside early. Said, "Excuse me, sir." Ellis nodded. Kept walking. Did not know the man. Did not recognize him. But the man recognized him. Not as a face. As a signal. A shape of consequence walking quietly with a cane. And all of it came from one small decision. One word. No. The silence spread slowly. Not through announcements. Not through emails or memos. Just absence. Absence in decisions. Absence in approvals. Absence in outcomes that used to be guaranteed, but now hesitated, shifted, delayed, dissolved. It started in a different building, one not connected to the original story. A woman named Carla was reviewing an application for funding. It was a program that used to sail through approvals. It had done so for years. Same documents, same endorsements, same people. But now something felt off. Not wrong, just unfinished. She flipped through the signatures, saw a space where something used to be. There was no blank line, no missing name. But Carla had worked long enough to know when a weight had been removed. She closed the file, moved it to review again later. And it never came back. At a separate department, a man who had built his career on connecting small initiatives to quiet support systems found himself suddenly unconnected. His calls no longer returned. His approvals delayed. His favors ignored. He went through his list of usual contacts. Half were out of office. Half responded with neutral phrases like, "We'll circle back," or "Not at this time." He tried invoking the name. Ellis. Quietly, informally. A raised eyebrow answered him. One contact even said, "If you're still using that name, you're not being read in on where things are now." He said, "I thought he was retired." The contact said, "Exactly," and hung up. The people who had once aligned themselves with Ellis without asking, without thanking, without acknowledging, they now felt it. Their shortcuts vanished. Their shortcuts were never supposed to exist. But they had, because Ellis, somewhere along the chain, had not stopped them. He had let them continue. Not because he agreed, because he saw them and did not interfere. But now he was gone. Not dead, not missing, just no longer interested. And that was worse. A woman who ran a consulting firm noticed a shift in tone before anyone else would admit it. She had built a third of her network around trusted sources. And when people asked who trusted her, she always smiled and said, "Their names I don't need to say." Now those names no longer returned her calls. She sent a handwritten letter to Ellis's old address. It was returned unopened. She did not try again. A policy advisor for a state program requested emergency flexibility on a transportation grant. Usually, this would take 48 hours. Now it had been 11 days. He asked a clerk in the system. They said, "The routing used to go through a verification field that no longer exists." He asked, "What does that mean?" They said, "It means your path is longer now." He tried to escalate, but the form kept kicking back an error. Legacy authorization not found. In spaces where Ellis had never even entered, his absence was now felt, because systems are built on weight, not just code. And some people are the weight. They don't block. They balance, until they no longer choose to. Back at the community center, a woman who ran youth programming was asked to submit revised safety protocol plans. She sent the same ones they had used for 5 years. They were returned with comments. She had never received comments before. She asked why. The reviewer said, "These used to pass with external assurance. Now we're reviewing internally." She asked, "Who removed the assurance?" No answer. Just red ink. Everywhere. A local politician, once praised for his connection to quiet communities, found that his endorsements dried up. He called his campaign liaison. Said, "What's going on?" They replied, "Your name is showing up in places it didn't used to." He said, "Like where?" They paused, then said, "You ever hear the phrase soft exclusion?" He said, "That doesn't mean anything." They said, "It does when people stop replying." A man who once hired Tate for a second-tier security team tried reaching out again. He remembered him as rough, but available. But every inquiry hit a wall. Tate's name triggered silent denials. No explanation, no flags, just systems that did not move. The man made one call to a contact in private contracting. The contact said, "You didn't hear this from me, but there's something shadow tagging that name." The man asked, "Why?" The contact said, "Does it matter?" The man hung up, burned the file, did not ask again. Ellis sat on his balcony, watched birds land on the cable wire 2 buildings over. He could feel it in the air, the shift. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He never wanted power. He just wanted room, to live, to move, to age without being someone else's spectacle. And the moment someone made him a target again, the world remembered that he was never alone. His son never followed up. He had learned from Ellis to let silence grow its own roots. He did not deploy systems. He did not sign off on lists. He did not trace the fallout. But he felt it in the way people spoke to him now. More carefully, more measured, less assuming. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Recognition of the quiet weight that had once steadied the floor and had now been lifted. A former associate of Ellis tried to reintroduce a dormant project. He pitched it as reviving foundational trust. The first question he got from the review board was, "Is Ellis on board?" He said, "No, but..." They interrupted. "Then why are you here?" That meeting ended early. He was not invited back. In a classroom where civic structure was taught, a professor used Ellis's story as a case study, not by name, but as a framework. He wrote on the board, "When someone whose presence made your shortcuts possible decides to step back, the system doesn't break. You do." A student raised their hand, asked, "Is that fair?" The professor said, "It's not about fair. It's about foundation. Some people are the ground." Back in a forgotten hallway, someone typed Ellis's name into an old terminal, not to track, just to see. The screen flickered, then went black. No warning, no error, just nothing. The system rebooted 5 minutes later. The user said nothing to anyone. And elsewhere, Mendoza heard his own name in a conversation. 2 people whispering near a coffee shop. He paused, waited. One said, "He's one of them." The other said, "From before?" "Yes." The laughter stopped. "Now it's just dust." Mendoza walked away, head low, not in shame, in understanding that he had been carried by something he never respected, and now walked without it. Ellis made no statements. He had no platform. He did not post. He did not protest. He simply remained still. And everything that once leaned quietly against him now had to learn how to stand on its own. Some did, most did not, and no one blamed him, because you do not blame the wall when it stops holding a roof it never agreed to carry. The collapse began without sound. No alarms, no messages, no headlines, just a series of things that stopped working, a form that would not load, a phone number that no longer reached a human voice, a meeting that was canceled and never rescheduled. And in each place where the failure occurred, no one could say exactly why. A mid-level coordinator in the city development office submitted a grant package that had been green-lit for 3 years straight. She used the same language, the same attachments, the same timeline, but this time, the portal returned an error, missing authorization. She reached out to her contact. He said, "It's the trust field we used to run your package through a separate queue. That queue does not exist anymore." She asked, "Why not?" He said, "It relied on someone we no longer contact." She asked, "Can we rebuild it?" He said, "You would need to find someone like him." She asked, "Who was he?" The contact ended the call. A small nonprofit that ran youth mentorship programs suddenly lost its eligibility to partner with local schools. No violations, no complaints, just a quiet update to district policy. Approved vendors must have verified third-party trust endorsement. They reached out to their previous verifier. He said, "I am no longer associated with that review process." They asked, "Did something happen?" He said, "No." They asked, "Can we list someone else?" He said, "Not someone like him." A private contractor noticed that 2 of his usual invoices were not being paid. He followed up. Accounting said, "We no longer process through that channel." He said, "But I have a legacy tag." They said, "That tag was retired." He said, "Who retired it?" They said, "No one did. It just stopped verifying." He tried to escalate. The escalation form was gone. He called an old colleague, asked what was happening. The colleague said, "He's gone. That's all." In a veterans resource network, a quiet flag was raised across 5 associated names. Not for criminality, not for fraud, just a note, not eligible for continued support. 3 of the 5 were from the original incident. Their names were not spoken, just removed. No statement, no press, no paper trail. Just a series of systems that refused to carry them any further. Tate applied for a position as a building monitor. No weapons, no clearance, no uniform, just eyes and keys. He passed the interview, received the orientation packet, but the day before his start date, he received a message. The message was only 6 words long. "Your access credentials cannot be issued." No explanation, no apology, just a gate that refused to recognize him. Harrison tried to go back to school. A short-term certificate, basic coursework, something to pivot his life. He filled out the application, checked every box, uploaded every document. Then the system froze. No rejection, no confirmation, just a loading screen that never ended. He went in person to the admissions office. The woman at the desk searched his name, then frowned, said, "We do not have a record of this submission." He said, "I watched it go through." She said, "Then it is being held elsewhere." He asked, "Where?" She said, "I am not authorized to know." Mendoza started seeing familiar faces cross the street when they noticed him coming. At first, he thought he was imagining it. Then he stopped pretending. One morning, he walked into a convenience store and felt the clerk tense. The clerk did not speak, just rang up his purchase and avoided eye contact. Mendoza said, "You know me?" The clerk nodded. Mendoza asked, "Did I do something to you?" The clerk said, "Not to me, but I do not need to find out if you could." Across departments, systems marked certain names with a soft gray highlight. Not a flag, not a warning, just a reminder. This file is no longer actively routed. Some users learned to close the file when they saw that note, not because they were told to, because they understood. Some doors, once closed, are not meant to be opened again. At a conference for leadership development, a speaker told a story. It was short, about a man who held no title, spoke very little, and changed the direction of hundreds of careers by doing nothing. A member of the audience asked, "Is that power?" The speaker said, "No, that is absence. And absence is what power becomes when it no longer needs to prove anything." Ellis walked past a government building one day. Two men in suits saw him from across the street. One started to wave. The other touched his arm and shook his head. The first man stopped. Ellis kept walking. He had never worked in that building, never stepped through its doors, but something about his gait made the street feel smaller for a moment. A proposal to revive an internal security mentorship pipeline was tabled without discussion. The proposal referenced a legacy approval model that could not be replicated. The chair of the review committee read the first line, then asked, "Does this mention him?" No one answered. She pushed the folder away, said, "Then we are not touching it." A contractor hired to evaluate long-term system dependencies submitted a chart showing a pattern of influence. At the center, a node with no name, just an initial, W. He asked what it meant. His handler said, "You are not paid to ask about W." He said, "But everything routes through it." The handler said, "Not anymore. And that is the point." One evening, Ellis stood by the window, watched a dog chase its tail on the corner. He smiled, then turned off the light. In another state, an approval system timed out. A project died in silence. No one called. No one asked why. Because some projects only exist if the person who kept them alive still believes in their purpose. And Ellis did not believe anymore. His son called. They spoke briefly. No updates. No urgency. Just breathing. The son said, "Things are quiet here." Ellis said, "They should be." In an internal memo meant for high-level clearance, a note was added. No further attempts to engage with the subject. Let the absence hold. It was unsigned. Everyone understood. Tate sat on his porch, hands open, waiting for something to return. A call, an opportunity, a second chance. It did not come. Because when the world removes your invitation, there's no RSVP. Only silence. Mendoza moved to another town. Tried again. New place. New name. But systems remember. Even when people forget. And every time he got close, something slid out of reach. He stopped trying. Told himself he chose a quiet life. But it was not quiet. It was empty. And that was not the same. Ellis opened a letter one day. No name. Just a single line. "You were right not to speak." He folded it. Placed it in a drawer. Then made tea. The streets were quiet again. But the quiet was not the same. It was no longer the silence of ignorance. It was the stillness of rearrangement. The way a room feels after someone has moved the furniture. You cannot name what changed, but you no longer walk through it the same way. Ellis still woke at the same hour, still rolled out with the same gentle push of the wheel, still took his tea without sugar, still passed the same cracked sidewalk where the tree roots had begun to lift the concrete. But something had shifted, not in him, in everyone else. He passed a young man one morning who looked down at his phone, then looked up and stepped back without hesitation. No apology, no overreaction, just a clean, respectful space. Ellis nodded. The man nodded back, and they both kept walking. It was a small thing, but it had not always been so. At the coffee shop on the corner, a new barista held the door open as Ellis approached. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just stepped aside with a grace that suggested she had been told, not to fear him, but to recognize, not his history, not his scars, but his space. Inside the building where it had all started, the security desk was quieter now. Different guards, younger, slower to joke. They nodded at everyone the same way, a kind of uniform respect. One of them saw Ellis once and straightened up, though Ellis said nothing. The guard did not know what had happened, but he had been told one thing during training. If he sees that man, do not interfere. Do not approach. Do not delay. He carries more than you think. The old ones, Tate, Harrison, Mendoza, were no longer mentioned. Not even in whispers. It was not shame. It was absence. Their stories had ended without punctuation. No court case. No dismissal letter. No memorial. Just an empty space in a system that had moved on without offering them a seat. Harrison worked nights now, moving boxes in a warehouse that did not ask for background checks. He spoke to no one. A new hire once asked about his past. He said, "I was loud once. That is all." And the conversation ended there. Tate drove for a delivery service. He wore a cap low over his face. Never entered buildings. Always left packages at the door. He avoided eye contact, because sometimes he saw faces that remembered, faces that knew, and he could not tell which was worse, being recognized or not being seen at all. Mendoza tried starting over a third time. New town, new look. He managed 3 months before the same patterns returned. A call unreturned, a file delayed, a neighbor who stopped speaking after asking his name. He stopped resisting. He stopped explaining. He lived small now, smaller than he ever imagined, and still too large to go unnoticed. Ellis watered his plants. 5 of them, 2 by the window, 1 near the radiator, 2 more in the kitchen. Each grew without noise, without rush. He had learned from them that strength is not in reaching. It isn't staying rooted. He no longer followed the news, but sometimes things came to him. An envelope, a note, an article clipped from a local paper. He read them all, then folded them away. Never shared them, never framed them, because trophies belong to competitions. And Ellis had never played a game. One morning, he received a package. No return address. Inside was a plaque. Simple engraving. No names. Just 5 words. Because he said nothing back, he placed it in a drawer, closed it, and made tea. People still tried to use his name, carefully, in shadows. But now, when they did, the systems paused, asked for verification, asked for proof. And when they could not provide it, the conversation ended. Politely, but permanently. His son visited once a month now. Still in plain clothes. Still no rank. They sat on the balcony together. Said very little. The son once asked, "Do you regret not speaking?" Ellis said, "I did speak." The son asked, "When?" Ellis replied, "When I stopped agreeing." They drank in silence after that. The son understood that power was not always in presence. Sometimes it was in withdrawal, in the space left behind when someone steps back and lets the world feel the difference. At a ceremony for quiet service, a low-key event attended by no press, a name was mentioned. Not Ellis's, but someone said, "He learned everything from the man who never asked for applause." Everyone in the room nodded. They all knew who that meant, but no one said it out loud, because reverence, when real, wears no name tag. In the city planning office, a young man asked why some applications required extra routing now. His supervisor said, "They used to pass through someone's shadow. That shadow is gone." The young man asked, "Who is it?" The supervisor said, "Someone who never wanted to be the door, but became the wall anyway." The young man stopped asking, but never forgot the answer. Ellis grew slower. His hands ached more in the morning. His wheels dragged a little on cold days. But nothing in him collapsed, because he had never built his life on being seen, only on surviving being ignored. And now the world paid attention not because it was told to, but because it had learned what happened when it did not. At the end of one particularly windy afternoon, Ellis passed by the glass doors of the building where it all began. He did not stop, did not look in, but from the corner of his eye, he saw a young man standing near the security desk. The man turned, held the door open, not because he was told, but because he wanted to. Ellis nodded once, then kept rolling, did not speak, did not smile. But in that moment, the world stood still again. Not empty, not cold, just reordered. The story ended where it started, with a man in a chair, not demanding space, not punishing those who mocked him, just being, and letting everything that could not hold itself without him fall quietly away.